will see a 3D web in the next 5 years. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Drax listeners, you heard it. Yeah, I heard it here first.
Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre. We're still on summer hiatus as far as live-to-tape shows are concerned, but we will be back in August, and in the meantime, every Friday, a hopefully inspiring discussion with a newsmaker from the broader Metaverse space. And you heard the fella, Tony Parisi is on the show today, co-creator of VRML, Virtual Reality Markup Language, back in 1994, 1 year before I got my first email address. Yeah, those were the days. It was 20 years ago when he and his partner Mark Pesce presented a paper called Cyberspace at CERN in Switzerland, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. And the paper described a way to visualize 3D on the web via VRML. 20 years later, what do we have? Walled gardens, Second Life, and the Oculus. Tony says, and he was on my SVVR panel, very vocal about, and he has been in the past, that the web is the metaverse. It's just in 2D for now. He recently wrote a blog post, Virtually Anywhere, saying that we have the metaverse, it is the web, and through webGL, which is working on most modern browsers, we just have to create the applications for it. WebGL was originally developed by Mozilla in 2011. By Vladimir Vukicevic, I hope I pronounced this correctly, and as we will hear from Tony in a second, who wrote 2 books on WebGL, by the way, Tony maintains that everybody can learn it and everybody can shape that non-proprietary metaverse, so that's exciting. In just a minute, let me get through the housekeeping notes. Please subscribe to the show on Stitcher. You find the banner on the right. It's an awesome app. You can fast forward 30 seconds through my rants and get back to the guest. You can call us on Skype, DraxFiles, email radio@draxfiles.com, or send an in-world message to get in touch to Avatar DraxFiles. You can, of course, sponsor the show also if you're a Second Life merchant. You can sponsor as an individual by taking out a voluntary subscription for only $100 Linden. You get an awesome killer vintage microphone and a neat on-air sign that lights up when you pay, made by Chris Lehman of Botanical. So now let's listen to the interview with Tony Parisi. I asked him to give us a little synopsis of his recent blog post, Virtually Anywhere.
We're now seeing attempts to develop virtual reality for the Oculus Rift using web technology. There are a couple of browser extensions you can get for Firefox and Chrome that will talk to the Oculus headset. You can write some JavaScript code using WebGL to render in stereo. And so people are starting to experiment with that, which is a really good thing because I believe that open technology is the way we're going to build a virtual reality metaverse. We're not going to build it on proprietary tools and in these giant downloaded native apps. So the blog posting is a bit of a rant to that effect. It seems like it's a good timing to launch a manifesto on this because what I'm seeing is a kind of repeat of this wheel of reincarnation we see in new technology adoption where folks are urgent and excited to build Oculus applications, and so they'll use whatever technology is available, understandably. And right now, the best path to building those apps is native, and that's just really wonderful, except when you start taking into account distribution, cross-platform development, and a bunch of other issues, it may not be the best way to do it in the long haul. So my lot in life seems to be to look at what's going on in the long haul, talk about that, maybe try and push that along a little bit too.
And write manifestos that hopefully people read and take into consideration. I forgot if you can give me a little bit of background. You and VRML, how did that start?
Well, this was just over 20 years ago. I moved to San Francisco with my wife from the East Coast looking for a job in technology, and I met a fellow, someone I knew from New England, and we started hanging out, a guy named Mark Pesce, and he was showing me real-time rendering on a PC. This was all done in software. There was no hardware graphics cards. I mean, they were really high-end. There were high-end Silicon Graphics workstations and then, kind of $1,000 cards you could plug into your PC at the time, really for, super high-end applications. And so what was interesting was that people were breaking through doing just software-only based rendering on what we would consider now to be ridiculously slow computers. Clock speeds measured in megahertz, not gigahertz, and tiny amounts of virtual memory and all of that. But still, people were doing some pretty nice real-time 3D rendering. And so Mark got really excited because his passion, he had just come off of some other virtual reality startup, actually, which looks a lot like an early incarnation of the kind of startups we're seeing now, obviously several generations back in the hardware, about 25 or almost 25 years ago. And Mark showed me this and said, oh, this is how virtual reality is going to happen. We're going to have these low-cost PCs. The internet's coming. I mean, we're talking late 1993. Mosaic had just come out. The internet's coming. We're going to bring that together with virtual reality, 3D rendering, display technology, and we're going to have virtual reality on the internet. And so we started working on research and development for software to do that. And before long, the World Wide Web community got interested in what we were doing, and we went and showed actually at the first ever World Wide Web conference. This is web pages, pre-JavaScript, forms with the submit button, no Ajax, no stone tools when it comes to web development. And yet there we were showing a 3D rendered spinning model. It was a banana, which is, it turned out to be prophetic. It was quite comedic, actually, what ended up ensuing over the next three or 4 years.
Did you debate a long time what it was going to be?
That's a model we had. It was an OBJ file. It was a 3D file format that we had, and we could read the text format in, connect it up with some web code. I wrote the parser to read it. Mark wrote the networking code. You clicked on the banana, it would launch the homepage of CERN, which was the host site for the World Wide Web in 1994. It was prophetic. It was also a bit arty. So this is this really crude banana laid against a black graphics window background, video game style. And what I realized years later, I literally realized this 6 months ago, is we should have done a white background and it would have looked exactly like the cover of that Velvet Underground Andy Warhol record. And it would have been very arty.
It would have been the first intellectual property violation on the internet.
Exactly. I don't know what we totally missed the boat on that. And it also speaks to the fact that I think designers and artists are going to be heavily involved in driving this medium, and it shouldn't just be in the hands of the geeks. And so we missed a couple of opportunities with that one just by the wrong background color.
Where did this all go with VRML? Because it's still years out before then Second Life and other virtual worlds came along and created walled gardens around each one of them. How did it progress from that presentation to the advent of Second Life and There.com?
Well, it's definitely not a steady linear progression. I'd say that that decade between 94 and 2004, when Second Life was really getting going, was really a lot of parallel evolutionary experiments, right? A lot of people sort of thinking about the same thing. So what happened to us was from 94 till about 1999, VRML was very big and very loud. It didn't go very far, but we made a lot of noise along the way. All the big companies in technology were involved. Intel, Silicon Graphics, Microsoft, Netscape. They had all the mojo around web browsing back then, the predecessor to Mozilla. And the list goes Apple, IBM, the list goes on. And millions of investment dollars were spent. Lots of money was spent. Companies were bought and sold, including a startup I had created that did one of the first ever plugins, the first ever plugin for Internet Explorer that could do VRML. There's a lot of activity around that, but the reality was it was super early. In terms of content creation, not that many people were doing that kind of 3D modeling yet. In terms of the technology just working, broadband not being there yet. There was no broadband. We're still talking dial-up modems. Computers still weren't fast. Hardware accelerators weren't there. So everything was early. The experience was clunky. And designers not only did not know really what to do, but they didn't have a lot of motivation to do it. So, there were a lot of 3D players distributed. I had tens of millions of them distributed of this little plugin we made with Internet Explorer. But when there are only a few handful of demo sites to view, it doesn't really matter that much.
So it didn't catch on with the individual developer. But what were the big companies hoping to do back then? An online store in 3D?
There were e-commerce examples. That's a good one. Architectural walkthroughs were very, very popular. CAD, design, sharing and collaboration. Some amount of entertainment virtual worlds. Actually, a couple of startups sprung up that predated Second Life by quite a bit that were building multiplayer, multi-user creation, collaboration, and gaming worlds on top of VRML. One was called Black Sun, named after the Black Sun and Snow Crash. Another one was called Active Worlds. And some of those survived for quite a long time. Black Sun, the company's still around, but they're not really doing a multi-user virtual world anymore. They are still doing 3D visualization technology. And so the tech that was VRML morphed into another version called X3D. the standard and the technologies around that kept on going. I took a little break from it at the end of the 90s, but then I couldn't keep away. So I jumped back into a next round of doing 3D visualization for the web with X3D, so the successor technology to VRML. And this time, by around 2006, I was building a multi-user virtual world platform with a couple of founders that we were sitting in a garage doing it together. And then Second Life got on the cover of Business Week in 2007. If everyone probably remembers the famous Anshe Chung avatar on the cover. And that's when the boom started and hype started around Second Life in around 2007. And by that summer, literally 2 months, 3 months later, I had a lot of investment money from large venture capitalists to do the same thing in a web browser, lighter weight, a little more mainstream targeted. Second Life was thought to be for the geeks, for the shut-ins, all these sort of insulting pejoratives you can imagine, disregarding the creative impulse and all the wonderful stuff that was built. And so a lot of folks, including management at my startup, for example, felt that there could be a middle of the bell curve mainstream virtual world experience targeted at everybody that would work just great. That didn't go that well, but that's a whole other story. But that's sort of where my path crisscrossed around Linden's. And that's kept me in and out of virtual reality and virtual worlds over the years. And of course, I'm still doing, and I've on and off been doing more of that, which we can get to if you want to.
I like to totally get into the history. It's interesting because I got 95 when I moved from Germany to the US. I got my first email address. This is fascinating stuff. I was going to ask, why do you think that VRML didn't catch on with the individual developers? Was it just early in the web in general, so that the web was there so overwhelming everyone that they just sort of said, well, let's just do 2D for now? And
yeah, I mean, you got it exactly right. I mean, the kind of revolution that we wanted to get going with VR and 3D on the web, that couldn't have been more ill-timed. You had legions of developers just trying to figure out how to build a page, and then how to code in Java first.
And then make the page blink.
Yeah, and then make the page blink. So the idea of doing full 3D development on top of that was a bit much. There was enough to do to just create media that everybody could see worldwide on web pages without extra downloads on every computer. Basically computers just couldn't run it back then either. And again, the idea of doing this without a broadband connection, the data is just a lot richer. Even though it's vector-based 3D, I mean, you're just pushing a lot of vectors, and then the 3D environments themselves are screaming for audio, video to be integrated in them. So it's all just screaming for a fat pipe. And developers were too busy, kind of just getting a business on web publishing.
If you want to tell me briefly why Vivaity, your virtual world didn't pan out. So at that time, everybody was, oh God, Second Life and virtual worlds are making big money, and the VCs are just throwing money all over.
They were like going after Second Life. Yeah, we had a couple challenges. The first was that you still needed a plugin to render your 3D. Web browsers could not do 3D. There was nothing in 3D, but sort of by the tail end of Vivity's lifespan, I ported a lot of our runtime to Flash because they added some 3D primitives by Flash version 10. It was still horrible, and it wasn't hardware accelerated, but we were able to get a lot of a big percentage of our experience into Flash by around 2010, including some really nice avatars. We kind of had to cut the poly count in half from 4-something thousand down to 2,500, but they still looked really good. But prior to that, I mean, we were just super challenged because we were trying to get a plugin-based experience into everybody's hands, through Facebook, through AIM users doing chat. In essence, it was a strategic mismatch, and I won't say who was advocating which strategy because I'll sound like I'm, telling people I told you so, but...
That's what we all live for. So we could sit in the rocking chair with single malt preferably and say, I told you.
Yeah, exactly. Better be single malt. So better have the money for that. So some of us wanted to go and directly attack Second Life, find those users that were spending the time and then spending the money. Making a real commitment, spending that 40, 60, 80 hours a week in world. Others wanted to, again, go for this sort of broadly defined and somewhat ill-defined mass consumer, Again, not the sweaty, shut-in, all those horrible stereotypes people can craft around, virtual world denizens and creators. Really insulting stuff. We were split on that strategy. We ended up trying to go for this mass market thing well before it was time for that too, largely because we had this plugin issue. So who's going to spend the time, even though it's a 3 megabyte plugin? I mean, we did a lot of great engineering, if I do say so myself, to get a great plugin-based experience, sort of like the Unity engine, into your hands. You download that, and you could see any 3D you want. It would have all your web data in it. It could play videos off of YouTube. It was hella cool, right? But someone would have to say yes to that install, and that's a big deal. And we were finding that, we'd get a lot of people signed up, mostly by, paying for AdWords originally. We'd get a lot of people coming in, they'd register, and then they would drop off when it was time to install that plugin. 75% of them would not install it. Wow. Whereas when we then finally, ultimately, again in 2010, converted the experience to Flash, we flipped those numbers around. We were getting 70 to 75 people coming into the experience and spending time in there. But at that point, the company was starting to run out of money. It was the middle of a recession, and there was another party going on next door, different set of distractions going on for industry people, namely at that point, social games with Zynga. So why make the commitment to a big virtual world when you could go hit a Flash site that would let you grow virtual soybeans and have a little sprite character running around tending them? It was a much more casual experience, much lighter commitment, yet very, very sticky and obviously very lucrative for companies doing those kind of games. That took the rug out from under us at that point, and we sold the company while we could. We did sell it to Microsoft, and that's cool. And it was a good technical learning experience overall, and I learned a lot on the business side, specifically about this, really understanding who these customers should be. And then, sort of bubbling up from that, more general, I think, learnings would be, again, timing was too early. We did not have 3D built into a browser, and that was just a killer, non-starter from the beginning.
I feel like an elitist when I go, if you don't have the time to download this, maybe you should just, I don't know, watch reality TV and get hammered.
Well, maybe, but, then how do you explain Minecraft? And how do you explain people using The Sims? How do you explain the commitment that people make on the core gaming side to downloading gigabytes of updates every time they hit their Warcraft site? And on it goes, And what about the 4 million people using modeling tools out there now? And
extremely complex ones with Blender or stuff like that, where the interface is entirely complex and people delve into it. But I think maybe that's the reason is that there is a value for them. They see it. They see that at the end of the horizon, when they get through that initial experience, then they will really get something out of it. I mean, Second Life is still struggling with that. I think they have 500,000 users sign up every month, and then they just don't stick around past the first 3 minutes.
They've always had that sort of first hour problem, and I don't think they've ever done a great job at that. They do a lot of things extremely well. The avatars are brilliant. The creation tools may be crude, but people have built some amazing stuff with them. So once you get past that hour, the ones that stick around seem to have a reason to come back. And I think there's something to be, people should study that and see what the motivation is there. And now I think everyone's probably wondering, right? Is it time with virtual reality making a big splash and webGL there? Is it time for somebody to come along and do a bigger Second Life that is a little more, got the first hour problem nailed, that maybe a little less quirky in some ways, higher fidelity. Obviously, Phil's trying to solve that right now in a different way, right, in his new company.
But now let's talk about, because you said, virtually anywhere with your blog post, and I saw what you tweeted, and Josh Carpenter from Mozilla was giving this presentation, and I saw it because I saw your tweet when they announced that Firefox and Chrome, they will have these plugins, and maybe you can explain this to me. You can hook up the Oculus. What did he say in his presentation there? Is that happening now, or is that happening in the near future?
It's happening now in the sense that development is happening now. So the way most of the browsers work, and it's true of Internet Explorer as of today or yesterday apparently, is they release nightly builds out into a developer channel. So frequent builds. I think at least Chrome and Firefox are on a nightly basis. They have an automated build system. So as features are being added to the browsers in beta, these are the ones that are not released to the users through the retail channel yet. But developers can subscribe to this other channel and get the updates. So if you get Chrome Canary, for example, that is the nightly for Chrome. And so that is a version of the browser that's got features that have not been shipped in the retail version yet. Experimental features, new things they're working on, things they want to get into developers' hands to start playing with by writing JavaScript code or what have you. And so the Oculus support in Firefox will be going into nightlies. It's not yet, but sometime in the near future. And I can't remember if Vlad, the lead engineer on it at Mozilla, Vlad Vukosevic, who, by the way, created WebGL. So Vlad is on to doing this now, and I don't know if he committed to a date, but it'll be sometime in the near future, July or August, from what I heard. And you'll get a version of Firefox that will allow you to connect your Oculus Rift. And if someone's built an application for it, it will do the stereo rendering native in the browser. So that should be fast. You don't have to write custom WebGL shader code to do the distortion and stereo split. And it will also have the head tracking in it. And you can just subscribe to JavaScript events and get events whenever the head is moving. So when you're tilting and orienting. So the way that's done now, for example, the experiments that I showed off at our WebGL meetup in San Francisco last week and that I blogged about, those are being done with a Chrome extension, or a Chrome and Firefox extension right now called VR.js. And so that you install it as a plugin to the browser, and that will do the head tracking. And then you still do your stereo rendering by writing a WebGL shader. And it's a bit slow. It's not that bad compared to the native stuff I've seen built in Unity or UDK, but it's a little laggy, but it's better than the alternative. There's this other thing you can do, which is called the Oculus Bridge, which installs a separate application that talks on a socket, an internet socket, and sends data to the browser, it just seems to be really slow. It'll just be, sometimes it'll stop and then burst, and send you more events. And that's just terrible for head tracking. I mean, that really needs to be in real time. If your eyes are looking at somewhere while your head turns, you need the display to keep up with it, ideally at 60 frames a second. And when you're having, any kind of delay beyond 10 milliseconds, then it's really jarring. And so having it built into the browser theoretically means that you will have no more of that lag. And the stereo rendering should give you, the fact that it's built in, it should theoretically give you a higher frame rate as well on your rendering.
So this is theoretically, just like as you're writing, the virtual world that we may have been waiting for outside of the walled garden. Everybody can be in it. We're in it. It's right there. And that then potentially makes these very nice exclusive clubs like Second Life possibly obsolete in the long run.
Yeah, possibly.
Maybe even high fidelity.
We'll see. I mean, we don't know how they're going to roll it out. I mean, Phil's said he's taking his time to get some things right. So we don't really know what their plans are. He's going to do something great. He always does. He will find some areas in which he innovates and really pushes the boundaries, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. He also, I don't think, is averse to building things in web technologies and WebGL. He hasn't made any real statements about that either way, but I know he's certainly looking at it and looking at having a web player. My point of view on this is a little bit different. It's from the ground up. It's a web infrastructure. And like Vlad Vukosevic himself said, and I'm paraphrasing, we're already in the metaverse. It's just got a 2D interface. So now that we have 3D media types at our disposal and ridiculously fast rendering with WebGL and other technologies, coming out that are going to make it easy to generate content for that, and the ability to hook it up into immersive displays, I think we're on the precipice here of an explosion of that kind of stuff. Now, I can't tell you how long it's going to take. I famously, said 5 years from now for a long time, whenever we hit one of these inflection points.
That's every one of you guys says always 5 years.
I mean, this one does feel like I can tell you things. I can tell you what I think is going to happen in 5 years. I think 5 years from now, everyone will have a digital footprint on the web in 3D. I can't tell you whether that's going to be in headsets or not. I mean, when I look at virtual reality hardware, it seems so early still. I mean, the DK2 looks great. The newer Oculus, the rendering is beautiful, but it isn't just about rendering. It's about input. It's about all these other issues with HCI, human-computer interface, that have barely been touched outside of real extreme lab research situations.
Can you elaborate on that input? What do you mean by input?
Well, just put an Oculus on right now, and what's the first thing you have to do? Someone grabs your hand and puts it on the keyboard. right? So you can use the WASD keys or everything I did last week with my Oculus WebGL demos. I made them work on a Xbox controller because the web browser has a gamepad interface, so you can write JavaScript code and get the input from an Xbox or PS4 controller. So I put an Xbox controller in people's hands, so at least they could just sit back in their chair, look around, and then start driving around. And sort of they were painting particles on a virtual ocean. It was a really sweet little app, and then driving a virtual car around, which wasn't so sweet because that had some laggy delays and it was kind of crappy.
One of my friends from Second Life, Loki Ellie, was an amazing content designer. He mapped an Xbox controller to in Second Life to the Second Life interface and got it working with the Oculus, and then he uses speech to text.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing. I mean, without a game controller, and here's the thing about a game controller. First of all, millions of people know how to use it. Yeah, grandma, quote unquote, might not know how to use a game controller. Though I'm sure some grandmas are really good GTA players, but that's a different story. But most people you can hand them an Xbox or PS4 controller, tell them what the controls are going to be to drive around, put the headset on, and they will go, and they won't look back, and they'll quickly accommodate to it, as opposed to reaching across for the WASD keys or the arrows, or even, waving at the leap motion and trying to find out where it went. The other thing I've seen is people plugging this stuff into the Razer Hydra. That's really good, but it's also got a tennis elbow issue. I mean, you're waving your arms around a lot. There's a lot of sort of ergonomics to it, but that game controller really seems comfortable to me. But anyway, that's just a first attempt. I believe we're going to, who knows what's going to happen on input. So meantime, though, there's this open greenfield opportunity on open 3D content creation, people sharing it, people making stuff, some with avatars, some without, some multiplayer, some not, some for entertainment, some for education, some for commerce. It's all over the map. We have this new media type, connected 3D. That's what I'm excited about. Of course, that's what I devoted 20 years of my life to, on and off. Add to that immersive VR, and who knows where it's going to go. But, again, prior to those headsets coming online, I think we're going to see the 2D metaverse, walls that we see on the screen start to collapse. I think we're going to see a lot more live 3D media. I mean, look what happened when 2.5D vector animation with Flash came around. Yeah, there were a lot of annoying sites in the skip intro button where you'd have to just go past them to go get the information. But there were also a lot of breakout web experiences enabled by just having 2.5D animation and rendering. So what can we do now that, with full-on real-time 3D? We will see a 3D web in the next 5 years. There's no doubt in my mind about that. You heard it. Yeah, I heard it here first. Drax listeners.
I'll call you 5 years, absolutely.
It's a date.
Now, what is to me exciting about Second Life is that it really democratized within the confines of a world controlled by a corporation. We can get into that too. But it kind of democratized content creation because the scripting language is fairly easy and the prim-based thing and stuff like that. Now, you wrote a book on WebGL, and I have a $40 off coupon, 40%, which I have to redeem. Where's the content going to come from? Is WebGL learnable by my grandmother or others that we can actually supply the web metaverse with content?
Without shame, I will plug my books. I've written 2 for O'Reilly and Associates now. The first is an introductory text called WebGL, Up and Running. That came out at the end of 2012. And then the new one is called WebGL, Programming 3D Applications in HTML5 and WebGL. And that just came out earlier this year. That's a more intermediate book. So if you're a web developer, jQuery, you can write some JavaScript code, make some pages. You can learn the technologies required to do WebGL development. The first book, again, introductory, just kind of take the sting out of it, make you feel comfortable with it. In either case, most people are going to want to use a JavaScript library. There's several open source ones like 3.js, Babylon.js from a group at Microsoft, Scene.js. There's a bunch of them out there. You can get the source code, and they sit on top of WebGL and give you a little bit more of a comfortable and friendly layer to program. But you're still programming in JavaScript. One of my pet projects now is this thing called Glam. I don't know if I told you about this one yet, but it's a markup language for 3D. So it's sort of me going back to my roots. I'm looking at everybody doing these great WebGL applications, and there's a lot of great stuff out there. Just Google, or go to the Chrome Experiment site at Google, and there's tons of them building really great stuff. All kinds of high-res models of cars you can click on and configure, to games, to educational bits and pieces, archaeological recreation, all kinds of stuff. But still programming, right? And then I was thinking, man, I go to these web developer conferences, I speak at them, I look up on the screen when I'm at someone else's talk, and they're almost always flashing up markup and CSS. So why don't we have a markup in CSS language for 3D that would render to webGL? So I'm building that right now, and it's called GLAM.
That's a great name.
Thank you. And that's very experimental. I just premiered it at a talk at the HTML5 Developer Conf a month ago. I've already got people making pull requests on the GitHub wanting to contribute. I'm telling people, hold on, it's too early. There was a bunch of hack demos to get to the talk last month, but I'm actively working on it now and fixing it up. And in about a month's time, it'll be ready to kind of unleash on the world and get people contributing to it. And the idea being you should just be able to basically type an angle bracket and cube and a right angle bracket, and then you've got a cube on the screen and type a little CSS and you get textures on the cube. It ought to be that easy to put together simple 3D sites. And then as you grow into your 3D, you can decide whether you want to get more complex about your programming and go deeper into JavaScript and all that. So I think that's an important part of the ecosystem too. But also, undoubtedly, people will be creating with pro modeling tools as well, exporting out of 3D Max and Maya. They'll be using in-browser tools like Goose Create or Verold's, Workbench for doing WebGL creation. They're in-browser tools where you can create all your 3D right in a browser environment, and then they host it for you. So there's all this great stuff coming out sitting on top of that browser API. It's a bit hard to digest in its raw form. Long story short, making it all possible for people at various entry levels, levels of coming into this to learn and grow with WebGL.
Okay, then I'll buy your previous book, and my 10-year-old and I will then learn it over the summer.
Awesome.
Now, everybody's talking, and I'm looking here at the WebGL experiments, fascinating stuff. When we talk about the web being the metaverse, how do you see in 5 years the collaborative aspect, the community aspect, that we find each other there on the metaverse and collaborate in real time? What are the components that have to come together to make that happen?
There's actually a lot of technologies out there already for building a web-based, let's call it multiplayer application right now. There are a couple of networking technologies that are the kind of technologies that are key to doing, shared presence, real-time collaborative world. One is called WebSockets. So that's an internet socket, the same thing that HTTP is delivered over, but it's a slightly lower level than that, TCP/IP. The transmission layer that transmits the data is available now to JavaScript programmers. It didn't used to be. So you can actually create a world that synchronizes and sends messages between clients, peer-to-peer or through a server using that kind of approach. Or you can do it with another technology called WebRTC. RTC stands for real-time communication. And that's even lower level, and that's been designed to handle really fast, low latency messaging for things like video streams and live audio and multiplayer gaming. So those two technologies together are there for developers to start playing with to make shared virtual worlds right now. Add to that it's really easy to whip up a web server in the cloud now and use even JavaScript and Node.js to actually build it. And I'm sure we're going to see a bunch of, shared world server systems coming online. And then, people need to figure out which language they all talk, so people talk to each other the same way, so the messages are received on all the clients. And, when I receive a packet of data that's, number 5, I know that means wave, all the technical stuff that was a wave gesture or whatever, right? That all that technical stuff has to be agreed upon by a group of people to make that collaborative. But that's all totally possible.
Right, that could be my website basically, and then the visitors to my website, they are in that world, whatever my website will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could decide as a design decision for your website, do I want to have a live presence there, right? I mean, it's like having live support on a 2D website right now, right? Do I want to have some bots there, always ready to greet people, talking to, agents, talking to people? Is asynchronous communication okay? It might be a 3D world, but maybe people just leave you messages. And you get them next time you come back. All of those things are possible now.
What interests me, what your thoughts are on the thing that nobody really wants to answer. When we talk about the metaverse, we have to talk about governance issues and who is in charge and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any dystopian scenarios that you are afraid of? Sometimes I have the perception that the standard answer to that is, well, we have to figure out the technology first, and then we'll figure out how the governance structure is. But I think then, if the recent past has proven anything, this illusion of the completely free internet was maybe a little bit of a pipe dream, because now we're going back to really just a handful of major players who are sort of have these subsets of the internet, and a lot of end users out there, they equate the internet with Facebook. I mean, let's be honest, they're only on Facebook.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I was going to get at was net neutrality issues, right? I mean, they're going to be the same issues in the metaverse. I mean, to me, I think these are, I mean, because of my point of view, to me, the metaverse is just the internet with a 3D interface. I think we're going to see the same issues we're seeing. It's always going to be a dance between the people supplying the pipe, folks laying down the roads for the content, and the ways for people to find each other, and the creators who create the content. And to me, that's one of the reasons, I'm an engineer like Phil and a lot of these guys, so I tend to have a knee-jerk reaction, which is similar, which is let's build it first and then we'll solve that. And so I share that opinion as well. But at the same time, I would say if you care about these governance issues, then the best thing you can do at this point while this is all being figured out and built is to be supportive of the idea of having this be an open and web technology-driven development versus, trapped in the Oculus, all being built with the Unreal Developer Kit and all being controlled by a couple of content creators, because that's going to be a metaverse in which people are going to be ruled over. But they'll decide to be ruled over by that because there'll be really entertaining experiences in there, right? And presumably they're not going to be chained to it and strapped in like in some horrific, Matrix dystopian scenario. But it'd be nice if they had choice.
Yeah, just like people voluntarily watch the same Disney movie 5 times in a row because the multiplex only plays it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, we live in places where there is a lot of cultural variety, but there are places in the country that absolutely don't have them. And that same thing is that's sort of my personal dystopian scenario. But like you said, nobody's going to strap people to it. People will voluntarily gather around it for the reason of the sheer power of marketing and maybe freebies.
Exactly.
Okay, final question. When we look out into the future, when augmented reality and virtual reality merge, I recently read a blog post by Raf Koster, the game designer, and it's entitled "How to Build the Scary Future Today." And let me quote here. He writes, "Create a tiny computer using a small chip. Stick a Bluetooth LE, that's those the iBeacon is the Apple certified version of it. Stick a Bluetooth LE or another transmitter on it, maybe with GPS. Call it a node. The node has a unique ID. Nodes get stuck on objects in a non-removable way, and then you have a thing ID. So all these things around us in the physical world broadcast their position in relationship to us. We can retrieve that information. Maybe we have goggles on or contact lenses that have an overlay over these things. Maybe they completely change the things into other things, into a complete different type of reality, kind of what is described in Rainbow's End by Werner Winch. I don't know if you've read that book.
I read another one of his where everything was basically, had some kind of intelligent RF embedded in it. That was a deepness in the sky was similar to that idea.
The idea is that everything has a chip embedded and can broadcast the location, and then you could have all sorts of different scenarios of a voluntary overlay of maybe a different era in time. You can go back in time. You have the information about each object that you have around you displayed in your device or your contact lenses or whatever. Do you see this coming in 6 years?
Unfortunately, I do. We seem to be putting computers into everything we can possibly get our hands on.
So you say unfortunately, so that is a little dystopian for you?
I have mixed feelings about it all, but that's probably just a reflection of me being a middle-aged person at this point. I believe there's a degree to which it could go too far. Who knows? I don't know, but this is all up to us. This is up to us as consumers. We have choice. I'm not sure that I would have been so enthusiastic about the idea of everyone being stuck with their eye device that they carry everywhere now and that can't live without and can't even get through the Starbucks line without looking at obsessively, including myself. But it's happened. And so now the question is, how much farther are we going to go with this? Are we going to spend at some point an hour or two a day inside immersive hardware longer with VR? Are we going to have AR overlays? We're going to have direct corneal implants that will let us see inside these RFID enabled devices and see those overlays. Sure seems like we would go in that direction. Computer manufacturers want to sell more computers. People always want cooler, niftier stuff. Advertisers always want to get our eyeballs. All the arrows are moving in one direction. I don't know if there's a force function endpoint. That's beyond our control. But I'm not delighted about the prospect of it, I'll be honest. And that's ironic being a technologist, but that's the way I feel.
What you're suggesting is, again, that I think that's what I'm hearing, is that we as humans still have the power to shut it off and go over. That's what I do. I go over to the piano and then I play on our piano, or I take a paper book at the end of the day. I'm not going to read it on a multifunctional device. I'm going to read it on a paper book because it forces me to single task. And I think if we learn how to get this balance back, then it's all good. We're still in charge, right?
We are. Yeah, I have. So I had a great moment like that today where I grabbed my kid and took him over to the REI camping store and bought him a pocket knife, and he was whittling actual wood with it. And he's 12. He's got a Leatherman that he borrowed
That's
from
awesome.
me. But yeah, and that was every bit as satisfying to him as Minecraft, or he got at this point, GTA and the other stuff he and his buddies play.
And then you took a photo of him doing that, and then you posted that on Facebook, and then you were out of the moment.
Yeah. And then, there's movements out there. I have some Jewish friends who are doing techno Shabbats now where they unplug Friday night for Sabbath and they don't replug in until sundown Saturday. And I think that's an awesome thing. We need to see more of that, So there's a way to get balance. Yeah, spend time with your kids, right? And get them out of the headset and get out of the headset. That's our best hope.
It's all up to us. Let's end on this very positive or very negative note.
All right, so that was Tony Parisi, a man with perspective and vision. And listen to him, kids. Get out of the headset now. Head over to the blog because there's lots of linkage to Tony's work and the history of VR. Oh, and by the way, next week we have confirmed a woman with perspective and vision in the virtual reality realm, Jackie Morey, formerly of USC's Institute of Creative Technology. Now with her own company, All These Worlds, another fascinating conversation that I truly enjoyed, and I hope you will too. So goodbye for now. Have a great week, everyone. And given the overall subject of history of VR, I'm encouraging you to watch this marvelous mashup documentary video from Loki Elliott. We had dissected it when it first came out a couple months ago. I'm linking to it, The Lost Virtual World. All right, that's it. Goodbye, everyone.
Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Leap Motion, SL Go by On Live, Stitcher, Bot Girls Identity Circus, Carvel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Escapades, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Nantra, Angel Red Couture, Fallen Gods Incorporated, What's Next, Avacon, and Landscapes Unlimited. Contact the show via Skype, DraxFiles, Avatar DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.